Okay, we are back. Back at it again. For more trouble, more chaos, more insanity. Let's dive back into another fight against madness, suffering, and chaos. I don't know what else to call it, guys, but the pro-life position is just beyond a joke at this point. We've debunked it to death. We've debunked it to hell. How can people still be on the side of the privileged and against the victims? We're on the side of the victims, on the side of the sufferers. We're on the side of those that are being abused, being tortured. That's what extinctionism is about. It's about being on the side of the weak, the sufferers. And not just on the side of some of them, but on the side of every sufferer and every potential sufferer. So, I mean, you don't even have to understand everything about extinction to be on the same side, right? When I first joined the movement, I didn't know anything about it, but I immediately joined because I was on the side of a world with no suffering and no victims, no torture. So that's what we're on. That's what we're about. My stream's not doing very well, I'm not getting many viewers. Could be because the content is getting flagged by the AI. That's looking quite likely, to be fair. Zero viewers. Okay, so into the madness we go. We'll debate ourselves. No. Let's try and look at extinctionism from another angle. From the angle of a responsible position, trying to do the best thing for the world, the right thing for the world, which is what extinctionism is about. And, people that sort of bring up utopia, for example, can't we just have a better world without extinction? But there is no way to run the world responsibly without preventing extreme suffering and torture, without prioritizing safety, prioritizing those that are going to suffer off worst. That's what extinctionism is about. It's about standing up for the victims, not denying their suffering, but instead focusing on it. The victims of life, the very worst victims, are being tortured so badly it's insane. And most people essentially just ignore that and willfully, accept it or allow it, ignore it, so that they can get on with their own lives. But that's wrong, right? The thing is, creating suffering is obviously wrong. If you're going to steal all of your food from someone, everyone can agree that's probably a bad thing. To steal from others is bad. To cause others suffering is bad, right? If we actively, if we have a slave chained up in our basement and we're making them, sew shirts and stuff so that we can make money, that's obviously bad, right? Now, the thing is, a lot of people can't make the jump to understand that allowing suffering is just as bad. Because if I know that my neighbor has a slave in the basement and is torturing them, but I don't do anything about it, then I'm really just as bad as the neighbor. Because I'm able to stop that suffering, but choosing not to. Right? So how is that any different from the neighbor who's actually causing that suffering? And especially to the victim, their suffering is unchanged. So you could say, I'm better because I'm not the one doing it. But it's only better for you. It's no better for the victim who's actually suffering. Oh, great. We've got Julio in the chat. Let's see if he'd like to join us live as a guest. Julio, come on, join the stream. Let's hear your opinions. Yes, in the same way that benefiting from the suffering of others is wrong, um, I mean, that's what extinctionism is about. It's about sort of a higher perspective of, should we allow all of this torture, misery, and extreme suffering so that others can benefit? That's the question, right? Um, and the answer is no, really, right? In every aspect of life, we already apply the same logic. So I don't understand why it's such a difficult question for people, really. Should we exploit others and benefit from their torture? No. It's as simple as that. The answer is no. It will never be okay to exploit the innocent, the vulnerable, and to cause them, truly extreme suffering, like really extreme suffering, and try and benefit from it. It will never be okay. It's wrong to steal. It's wrong to torture people. It's wrong to allow suffering and, not call the police on it and walk away. And extinctionism is simply scaling that up to a global scale. It's, in that sense, it is using the same morality that a lot of people already use. Because morality isn't even that complicated. It's just like, don't allow others to suffer and, get tortured. If you can stop it, then you should. You shouldn't selfishly prioritize your fun over others being tortured. I mean, there's lots of interesting ways to think about it. If I was offered the chance to go to heaven, but I knew that somebody was going to go to hell as a result, then, I don't think I'd be able to enjoy the heaven, knowing that someone was being tortured. And yeah, I mean, you could argue that, what about the people that would selfishly enjoy the heaven and ignore the torture? Does that somehow make it okay? Well, no. They don't need that fun. They don't need that pleasure. They'll be perfectly fine without it in the safety of non-existence. And that's more important than allowing someone to be tortured horrifically. When someone passes away, not always, but sometimes it's peaceful. And, everyone understands that, if they died from cancer, that their suffering is over now. They're safe from it. The nightmare is over, basically. So it's a good thing for a lot of life, right? So the whole idea that, giving that up, giving up your privilege so that others cannot be tortured, it's a simple thing. It's the right thing to do. But I guess for many people, they try and, really they're just scared or selfish, but they try and warp it into some sort of massive philosophy thing where, but what about all the philosophy that allows for, us to exploit and allow others to be tortured for our benefit? No, it's just massive levels of coping, basically. But, think about when there was slavery in America, right? And, there's people saying, we need to stop this, stop slavery, right? Obviously, all the people that were in favor of slavery were coming out with all sorts of nonsense. Okay, we've got our first caller. Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. Interesting topic. I've listened to you several times. Always find that it's extremely thought-provoking. So, and by the way, one of the legitimately unique lives on TikTok. So, congratulations for that. That's a tough thing to say. So, and it's not a
Thank you.
complete waste. This is actually not a complete something that's not a complete waste of time because at the on the face of it, I think many of the people that come across you are gonna probably either dismiss or think it's satire, which it may be. And I just may be, maybe you're just very, very good at at hiding the satire, but you do provoke deep reflective thoughts, which I don't think humans do enough of. And so for that, just well done. Let's start with that.
Thank you.
Oh,
It is a serious movement. We have a website, we've got lots of activists, dozens of social media channels trying to grow the movement. It's serious for the sake of those that are actually depending on extinction. Future victims of torture and
yeah.
extreme suffering are relying on us.
I listen. I don't disagree with you on many, many things regarding humanity and suffering. I think that's a I think this is there for anybody to see any day of any week. Just that there's endless amounts of suffering at all ends of the life spectrum, from the smallest to the largest. But I do have a thought for you to consider, and I would like your feedback on this, and that is that on one of your previous lives, you asked a question regarding the purpose or a point of suffering. In fact, it may have been one of your prompts that you were looking for was a purpose. What's the purpose of suffering, or what was the point of suffering? And so, one of the things I would like to posit, I guess, is that there is to me a purpose for suffering. And that is that if you, and I'm going to use some really poor analogies, and they'll be easily dismissed, but you can get the idea of what I'm trying to say is that if you go do some kind of manual labor and you develop blisters on your hands, and these blisters that you develop would be considered suffering, those would fall under the topic of suffering based on the definition that you have. And it's a loose definition that I haven't really pinned down yet with you, which is anything that is going to be destructive or impeding the growth of life, or the proliferation of cell division, right? So let's say any kind of life. So if I'm creating blisters, I'm going against that very life effort. And yet somewhere in there, out of that comes these calluses that are these protectors against future suffering. Now that's a really poor analogy, but something to consider. But on a grander scale, I would like to ask you this: do you think humans, or any life form for that matter, has evolved to the epitome, to the pinnacle of what they're going to evolve to become?
No,
Okay,
no, I think
I don't. I don't either. And so if we haven't evolved to where we're going to be, there is this line. It's not a very good movie, but it's a line that stuck with me, and it's out of The Day the Earth Stood Still. And there's this physicist who's speaking to the alien, and he basically reiterates this: on the precipice, when humanity is on the precipice of extinction, is when they will evolve. Now, I don't necessarily believe in that specific context, but could you imagine a day when we are hive mind, when we are in a pluribus kind of state, when we are evolved enough to share empathy or connectivity, so that when we harm another, we are only harming ourselves? Because if you believe that there is some future of life, of humankind, where we have evolved to the point of telekinesis or any other type of physical connectivity with others that would then help us realize the suffering that is caused. Do you think that would be a point where we may ease the suffering, where suffering may diminish in kind of this mathematical, right now it's increasing, no doubt, across every life form. I agree with you that we have this increasing if we were to graph this out. But do you think there's a point where we may evolve to some level of awareness where that suffering begins to reverse or diminish, and that the graph then now is on a downward trend?
Um, well, I mean, the standard is always 100% safety from extreme suffering and from victims,
I
right? So
get
that
that.
always has to be the standard. So if you know if we were reducing suffering, it's still not good enough because it's not fair to the victims who could have been helped faster, right? If you can end suffering quickly, but you choose to reduce it slowly, then
Hmm.
it's unfair to those that suffer, right? Um, but yeah, I've always said on my streams that if we somehow have like godlike powers and can provide 100% safety from suffering and from bad lives, then that would be a different scenario. And maybe that'll happen billions of years from now or sooner. But until we get to that point, we have to do extinction, right? We have to prioritize preventing suffering in the practical way. This godlike power, which is the only way that you can actually really guarantee 100% safety from suffering and things going wrong. Um, I don't think it's realistic to work towards or practical. And it kind of ignores the actual imperative and urgency for preventing all of this extreme
Hmm.
suffering, which is going on.
So, by the way, when you say godlike powers, that tells me like that's an intimation of non-physicality. So we've got basically zero physical existence. If we're a deity, if we are in a godlike state, based on any one of the religions you want to stop and look at, then that means that we are not in physical form, because any representation of physical form would would result in suffering. You cannot be. So let me ask you this: has the movement? Have you guys developed some postulates or some kind of mission, not mission statements, but some proclamations? For example,
We have a
any physical,
manifesto on our website.
yep, any physical existence. Then any physical existence in any form beyond, what, one cell would be would include suffering. Any physical form of any kind would result in suffering. Is that fair? Is that something you would agree with?
So it's not just about definitely resulting in suffering. It's the possibility of it resulting in suffering as
So it's
well. So
potential. So it's okay. So you're looking at potential suffering. By the way, this is one of the things that I have dwelled on, I guess, contemplated for a long time, is that if you were to take any massive event in human history, back in Germany, when that massive event took place with the extinction of a number of people, and I don't want to say anything that's going to get you in trouble. I think it was terrible and horrific what took place, but what bothered me more than anything about that event was the lost potential of those people. And so, to your point, you're viewing this from a different position. I viewed that event as the loss of future potential of any human that is no longer here. And you're viewing that event as the elimination of any potential suffering that those humans would have gone through. Is that fair?
no, I mean, we view the Holocaust as a terrible event of
Of
suffering,
course.
and there will be many more like it,
But
until
it
total
prevented,
extinction.
but it prevented then, based on your logic, that event prevented the future suffering of every one of those victims. Is that fair?
I mean, but it caused so much suffering to cause it as well.
But so now we're getting down to it, right? Because to prevent future potential suffering, you must, there's no way around it, you must inflict suffering now. And so isn't it just a trade? Aren't we just mathematically saying, hey, I'll pay you, let's pay this suffering debt today so that you don't have to suffer incrementally. In fact, we're going to pay this large suffering debt today instead of you paying for it incrementally over the course of your life.
I mean, the Holocaust wasn't any sort of ethical form of euthanasia. It
Yeah,
wasn't even
not
done
even the Holocaust, by the way. Not even
compassionately.
the Holocaust. Just any event today. You take some life form, a dog, a child. You reference children and suffering, and I'm right there with you. But just take any one of those and say we're going to inflict the maximum amount of suffering today on that life
Why would you
form.
need to do that?
Well, no, to end the future potential suffering. That's what the extinctionist
Well, no,
movement.
because euthanasia is usually a painless thing, right? It's done in an ethical way. It's done as painlessly as possible. The Holocaust is the opposite of that, right? It
Oh,
caused
yeah. But,
extreme.
agreed completely. So, and I didn't bring up the Holocaust to dwell on that specific event or to try to use it in any other way than to say that it drew from that. I focused on the loss of human potential on the planet from that event. That was what I think was the most damaging, or all of the beneficial things that would have ever come from those people. It was a horrific event to be sure, and suffering was 100% throughout the entire event. But I viewed that and said, wow, look at the loss of future positive potential these human people would have contributed to society. And
Right,
and that's the only
but
reason I brought that particular event up. But to your point then, well, I was just going to try and get clarity then. So for your extinction events for all life forms, are you then saying that there would be no suffering in the manner of extinction?
ideally,
Okay.
and quite
Because
possible.
yeah, because that would be an undertaking of you realize what that even you're intelligent enough to understand the undertaking that you're suggesting.
Well, look, we already euthanize animals. We already control animal populations. It's not a big deal, right?
Well, there's a ton of fear that goes into it. I'm not sure if you've ever seen an animal be euthanized. I have. I've held an animal being euthanized, many. And so there is a tremendous amount of fear in that moment that is happening when an animal is being euthanized. And if you doubt me, I would suggest you go down and sign a waiver and volunteer at some shelter someplace. And I think you would be able to understand what happens in those moments. It's not seconds, it's moments that it takes for a life to leave this plane, right? For a life to leave this world, it doesn't go easily. And so there is a price, a suffering price, if we could give it a quantity. And now,
But as Luke's just said in the chat, a natural death will be much worse.
that's to be paid at the time of
But
demise. Go
euthanasia
ahead.
is actually a blessing, really, because again, the alternative is a much worse death.
The alternative to euthanasia,
Yeah,
such as passing quietly in your sleep.
but that's but you're talking about a tiny, tiny minority, right?
Yeah, I don't know how tiny that minority is, but I think the point of bringing that up was this. I think that
Well, it's a very tiny minority. Over 99.999% of life on this planet, including wild animals, have a horrific death.
by the way, if you're going to include the animal kingdom, then I'm going to agree with you. They have a that is a
Well, we're talking
psych.
about animals, right?
Yeah. I mean, just all life. Then, yeah. If we're talking about all life, then I would agree that euthanasia or passing quietly in your sleep doesn't necessarily happen to the majority of the wild animal kingdom. Um, but functionally, you must see the restrictions on possibility. I mean, like it's not physically possible for humans to, right? You understand that I think that's why there's this hint of satire, even if you're doing this for like a oh, I don't know, let's just call it a documentary you're going to release in a couple of years or a school project or something. Um,
But the thing is, right, I think the main confusion here is that we're not talking about human euthanasia today, right?
okay.
Um, our mission is, animal extinction, potential universe extinction, and then finally human extinction, right? So, we're probably talking about hundreds, maybe even thousands of years from now. The situation is going to be completely different. The options for euthanasia are going to be completely different. So, the situation is most likely going to be so different that most of the points we're discussing here are irrelevant.
So then your progressions are the humans are the arbiters of this extinction. So they, and I'm not being sarcastic here, but conveniently, thankfully, humans are the last to go, so to speak. Is
Well,
it all humans are the
there's no one
last to
else that
go?
can do it, right?
Okay. Yeah, I've heard you say that before, and I would agree with you. There wouldn't be anybody else to facilitate it. And so if humans are here to first wipe out the entire animal kingdom, all life as we can detect it. And by that you must mean all vegetation as well. I mean we must purge the earth of all life, or where's the distinction in because now we're getting down to viruses and different types of life form that are all fighting in their own way to survive. So is there a line on life that I just don't see?
Um, it's just as much as possible, basically.
Okay. So as much life as possible we would erase, and then we would then work our way outward
Prevent.
into the
It's
universe.
mostly about preventing. But yeah, I guess euthanize as well. Yeah.
And then we work our
That's-
way out into the universe to any life that might be present out there. And then
Yeah, I mean,
once,
in
yeah.
terms of the universe, it's mostly going to be prevention. Most of the potentially habitable planets that we come across, they're probably not going to have life already, and it will be about preventing life from developing there. Now, I could be wrong, and there could be, every planet has life, um, and if that happens, then yeah, it's just about like preventing billions of years of more suffering. Um, so it is more about prevention, if
Okay,
that makes sense.
but by the way, this is interesting then. So if and I don't want to take up too much of your time. Feel free to drop me down if you've got some other people that want to come up. But I did have another thing I wanted to ask you then. So is there, I guess where this sprung from, where this concept, this movement, and everything came from is, I agree with you. There is suffering on the earth that is almost unbearable once you're aware of it and you see it. You can't unsee it, and it's almost unbearable. And so, to your point here on this, in your life, the life that you have here, do you not believe that you could go out and counter the suffering? So, for example, if you yourself dedicated your life here on this earth to making, taking 100 steps towards non-suffering, towards easing suffering of other living things, for every one suffering event that you encountered, wouldn't you see that in and of itself, I know you said immediate, like there was this urgency for to stop suffering, but if you could teach people to again to make the graph go on a downward trajectory so that suffering is diminishing, um, would that not be, I mean, what caused this?
Yeah. So it's a good question, but that would still be um, taking advantage of the victims for benefit. It would still be not truly prioritizing. Jesse, you've cut out So I'm just going to kick you because I can't hear anything you're saying, but I will answer. Um, yeah, extinctionists will always prioritize the victims, and that's because um, we know that the suffering is far too extreme and terrible um, to ever allow it for benefit. So, there's no world in which you'll get an empathetic person to downplay or ignore or make a trade on the suffering of someone else so that another can benefit. Um, we would, it would just be wrong to see all of those victims being tortured and say, well, maybe someone will have fun as a result. So it's okay to exploit them, take advantage of them, allow them to be tortured. There's no like upside, right? The thing is that in a vacuum or in heaven, you could say that pleasure has lots of value, right? And that life has lots of value. But when it comes to a situation where you have to either choose between, a suffering-free world and a world where, babies are being tortured so that others can have fun and survive and brain rot and watch Netflix, it's not okay. It's not an acceptable trade. No one deserves to suffer. That's kind of the whole point of extinctionism. No one deserves to suffer. No one deserves to be forced to suffer so that others can benefit and have fun and have pleasure. There really is nothing more to life than it being a privilege and the chance to experience pleasures and fun. And sure, you can say that, oh, but I've got my family depending on me, and it's, well, that really just serves the fun machine for you. What's beneath that would be survival. You kind of have survival, and then maybe, if you're a lucky one, you're very privileged, then you get to have some sort of fun on top of that. Most people are just surviving. They're not even having a great life. And the flip side is extreme torture. Literal children in dungeons right now, right? That's what this freedom and freedom to live is causing. And in nature especially, the majority of the population on our planet is being tortured in the worst conditions. And the thing is that you can't really have a coherent or serious position where you're effectively saying we should not end suffering. I mean, like, it's for example, right? You've got billions of animals just being tortured to death. We don't need them around, right? To say that they should just sit there and suffer is wrong. All we have to do is get off our bums and help them prevent their suffering. So, there's really no excuse for not preventing forced existence and suffering. Even for these people that fantasize about heaven and all this great, potential life, if you want to do that, then you can go and do that in the future, right? But we have to deal with all this suffering as fast as possible. Now, if there's any room left over for you to have fun, then whatever, right? But the priority is the victims. There's never going to be a world where we say it's okay for someone to be in hell so that someone else can be in heaven. And again, the reality is that no one's in heaven, but lots of life forms are in hell. So it's a very skewed, in the wrong direction perspective that most people have. They're looking at it completely upside down. 99 or more % of life is effectively in hell on this planet. And instead of saying, we should stop more lives from being sent to hell, people are saying, well, We can kind of use the the heads of those babies who are still alive and being tortured as stepping stones, basically, and create a ladder out of victims, so that we can reach, a shiny apple, right, or something like that. So no, using victims as a ladder is wrong, and really that you can't have any sort of ethical framework that prioritizes pleasure over safety. It's not a responsible thing. That's effectively what it is prioritizing pleasure over safety, prioritizing the lucky over the unlucky. Saying some people should have fun and others should get tortured to make it happen. It's the wrong way around. No one should be torturing others to have fun. It's simple morality. Okay, we have a guest. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
It's an intriguing theory. Let's say, hypothetically, this were to happen. How do you see it becoming a reality?
So it's not just like a question or a hypothetical. We've actually, like I say in the background, our movement is working to achieve this. Proextinction.com. There's been lots of movements throughout history. The anti-slavery movement, the vegan movement. It was only a matter of time before there was a movement that targeted all suffering and all victims instead of just one type. And also the worst off victims, those that are forced to exist into a life of extreme suffering, lives worse than non-existence, right? Lives where they'd be much better off not existing. The worst thing in the world, and again, I challenge everyone in the chat to suggest anything worse, is when someone or a life is forced to exist and experiences hell-like extreme suffering that they can't escape. Babies can't opt out, as people put it. Children can't really opt out. Most of them are forced, well, they're all forced to exist. And those that are facing extreme suffering in those situations, it's just so horrible for them and so awful. And, for the worst ones at the top of the suffering spectrum, it's just incomprehensibly bad.
So you're just exclusively about humanity.
No, it's about all life.
So can you help me to understand how this could be done? It would seem to me that, the power of nature in the creation of life, I don't want to go all Jurassic Park on you, but nature seems to have a way to perpetuate existence. So how would you make that impossible?
Well, firstly, you don't. So yeah, we do want to prevent life. That's from coming back. That's a main objective. But even if you were to remove the animal population on the planet now, that's more than doable already. So that we can already successfully prevent lots of suffering on Earth. And yeah, it's a difficult challenge. It's a big challenge to completely control it and prevent it from coming back. 1,000 years ago, it would have seemed like a crazy proposition, so impossible. Today, it's already much more possible. And tomorrow and, going forward, it gets easier every day as science and technology develops, not just around the world for general things, which lifts, all boats, but as the movement for the pro-extinction movement gets bigger and we can start actually focusing science on extinction, then it will really start to get a lot easier.
And what makes you think that living things are just going to get on board, particularly people? Like you're saying, it's not going to be under their control.
Yeah, we don't think they're just going to get on board. That would be very naive, right? So yeah, it's going to be difficult. It's probably going to be a multi-generational project. Could take hundreds, even thousands of years to overthrow society and the status quo, if you will. There's been lots of movements throughout history that are still fighting for their goals. And so yeah, we're not expecting this to be an overnight thing. But we do think it's the right thing and that we should fight for it no matter what.
You say we. Like, how large is this group of people that are like-minded to you?
Yeah, there's like a couple dozen activists. The movement's been around for about 2.5 years, and it's growing.
It honestly almost seems kind of ironic that your solution to ending suffering is to end life for all things,
Well,
even
what
those
causes
that aren't
right?
suffering.
Right, but the existence of life is what causes suffering. It's the condition for suffering.
And you're thinking the condition of suffering is inherently part of living things.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of suffering around the world. I think everyone suffers, every life form suffers, but those worst off definitely rely on extinction the most.
So why wouldn't you focus your intellect on ending suffering
That's what
instead
we
of
are doing.
ending life?
Because it's the fastest, most effective way to help the victims, and it's the most surefire way to do it. It provides the highest degree of safety, 100% safety, right? If I were to have a child right now, I couldn't guarantee it's not going to have a bad life, but if I don't have that child, I would be guaranteeing it wouldn't have a bad life, and that's more important.
Wow. Pretty intense line of reasoning for sure.
Well, there's extreme suffering on the line, so we have to really be considerate towards it.
So at what point in your life did you come to believe that, I mean, we're talking about your family, your friends, everyone you love, everything you love,
Yep.
you're just willing to hand over or end, I guess I should say.
Yeah, the thing is, like in comparison to safety, nothing else matters really. Safety is paramount. It's the most important thing. Um, you know, Existence and having a bit of fun and the pleasures of life don't outweigh the dangers and victimization and extreme harm that comes as a result.
So just in theory, I guess there would have to be one living thing left standing, unless you're envisioning like a Terminator style using the technology to eradicate life. And then, I mean, what's left behind? Just a dead rock hurling through space? You don't think that the conditions for new life would ever arise?
Well, they might do. But yeah, part of our mission is to try and prevent that. And it's not just for Earth. We want to do as much of the universe as possible. But yeah, starting with Earth, obviously.
So how would you go about assuming, I mean, I've never seen an alien, but I think it's kind of silly not to believe that life doesn't exist in other places in the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't even control what happens on this planet, much less life
So
forms that very well may be superior.
yeah, I mean, it might take millions of years, but that's a drop in the ocean compared to preventing billions of years of suffering. So even if we had to suffer for like 100 million years more, and we could only prevent one planet from suffering, even that would still be worth it. But we have the potential to maybe help lots of planets.
Hmm. Well, I appreciate your honesty. Um, I guess the only curiosity I have left is how this could be done.
So step
But you
one
say,
is growing the movement, and pooling resources, getting more people on board. Step two is finding the answers to the questions like how. Opening laboratories, starting to research it. In the same way that if you wanted to cure cancer, you wouldn't need to know how. Otherwise, you'd already have the cure, right? You'd have to, just dive into it and start, reading about it, looking into it, experimenting, stuff like that.
well, as far as humanity is concerned, I guess I can perhaps side with the idea that if you're talking exclusively about everything except, like, exclusively talking just about people, if you eliminated people from the earth, the earth is going to thrive. I mean, it seems like with the direction we're going globally, we're kind of working on doing this on our own already.
Well, no, I mean, like, even if, even the great asteroids that wiped out most of the dinosaurs, even that wasn't enough to cause total extinction. So actually causing total animal extinction on Earth is a much greater job than most people realize. You can't just throw a couple nukes or something. You can't just cause a bit of climate change. There's life at the bottom of the ocean, for example, and life adapts, life survives, life evolves. So we have to be very thorough. It's going to be a very big challenge, and we can't just rush it or half-ass it.
Okay, I think what I meant to ask is, what if you just leave it with humanity and let wild animals and living things that don't intentionally cause suffering, and just let the earth thrive without people on it?
Because animals actually suffer the worst. So, obviously, suffering is our priority. Animals suffer the worst, especially at the hands of each other. They have no shelter, they have no security of food, they have no weather safety. They're constantly being chased by murderous animals and then eaten
That's
alive. They've got
that's the cycle of life.
yeah, it's
I mean,
terrible.
it's not like you would take a water buffalo for existence. A water buffalo doesn't, if it watches its young killed by a lion or whatever water buffalo predators are, they don't feel suffering. They might feel pain to the point of death, but that's the whole cycle of life. I think without people on Earth, the Earth would be
But the
perfect.
cycle of life is just a concept. It's just like a word, right? It doesn't have feelings or desires or needs. The only ones that actually need anything are the animals.
But they've been designed through evolution to survive. Like, they'll always be there. They may eat each other. They may
Well,
fight and kill each other for
I think
whatever
they were
reason.
designed more to just reproduce, right? Survival is just for the sake of reproduction. So, all the suffering that happens in the meantime, it doesn't matter to nature, right? But it does matter to the animals. And most of them, most animals that get born get eaten alive as babies. So it's not a nice experience for them. You wouldn't want to experience it. You wouldn't want your mother to experience it. So no one should have to experience being forced to exist. You're born with brain damage or other physical diseases, then you're starving, and then you get eaten alive. It's a horrible thing, and all of this is with confusion, fear. You don't understand where you are, what's going on. There's no perfect understanding that helps you cope with it or anything. It's mostly just fear, extreme terror. So you can't really call that anything but suffering.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I've scrolled through and seen you talking before, and it is intriguing. I wouldn't say I'd volunteer to sign up for your plan, um, but it's interesting, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, and maybe check out our website, proextinction.com.
All right.
Cheers. Take care. Another great conversation. Let's have more of that. Open-minded, honest people. That's a good thing. Some people resort to straw manning and stuff like that. It's always nice to have someone that you can actually have a polite conversation with. The queue is empty, so we are waiting for our next. It doesn't have to be a challenger. Anyone that has some questions, just a bit of curiosity, that's fine too. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Um, I'm a little bit confused by the prompt, but I heard you talk to the previous person. So can you just let me know a little bit about what you mean by extend? I
Yeah.
can't say the word. I can't talk right now. But yeah, can you tell me a little bit more?
Yeah. So the movement is working towards having a suffering-free world. Extinction is the only way to prevent forced existence in birth, so that's a bad thing. And it's the only way to provide 100% guarantee of safety from extreme suffering and bad lives, terrible lives. Currently, the system we have, most life is forced into a really bad life. Over 99% of animals are killed as children. They just suffer and then have a cruel death as well. And many humans are also, put into terrible lives where they'd have been better off not existing. And so it's about providing safety for all life from forced existence and extreme suffering, having a suffering-free world, ending suffering as fast as possible for the sake of those who need it and who are relying on extinction to prevent their torture.
I see. So I guess your idea is to create a utopian society, but I I don't know how to say this. That is not very realistic because as long as you exist, you're gonna be suffering. Existence is suffering, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I think it's a good thing actually that we experience life in this way. We experience good, we experience bad. I think
Well,
we should
it might
not
be
just.
good for the lucky ones, but for the unlucky ones, it's really bad. There's nothing good that comes from it. A baby that gets tortured to death. There's no justifying that, right?
So I guess when you say so for example, a baby being tortured, right? So are you saying that humans should go extinct and like no baby should be born, or what does that exactly mean?
So yeah, we have to cause animal extinction first because they can't do it. Then potential extinction for the universe, or as much of it as possible. It could be full of suffering and victims that need our help. And then finally, as the only species capable of preventing suffering for other species, humanity can finally go extinct at the end. Yeah.
So you don't believe in natural selection?
We don't worship it like a god. No.
I think it's because what you're trying to do is human-made natural selection, right? You want the strongest, the healthiest
No, it's more
species
about
to.
just preventing as much suffering as fast as possible and as effectively as possible.
But that's what nature already does that. That's what the pre-selection process is. Like
No,
nature
nature
takes out the
causes
weak.
suffering. Nature tortures the weak, right? And then murders them brutally.
No, nature just takes out the weak, which it should be fine because it's like,
Do you
I'm
think it's
not saying
okay for
it's
the
not
weak to be
sad.
tortured to death?
Well, that's essentially what you're advocating. Not really. Like, I think what I'm
No,
saying
we're
is
advocating for the opposite of that.
you're saying that they should not suffer, therefore they should not exist at all. What I'm saying is like, if you exist and you tend to be on the weaker, like let's say you have, I don't know how to say this, that this makes me really sad to say, but like you have health conditions that prevent you from living a long time, that's a natural process. Like you're gonna unalive at some point. You're not gonna live to your fullest potential. That is nature doing its work. It's sad. I'm not saying that should happen, but I
But
mean, and
you're treating
I've
nature as some kind of god here. You're basically saying, well, that's what Jesus decided, so we can't
I'm not
question
a
Jesus.
Christian at all. No, I'm not
But you're
Christian.
treating nature in the same way that Christians treat Jesus, right? It's unquestionable. It's our God. We don't think about it, just accept it.
No, you can
So,
question it. You can,
but
yeah, you can criticize it.
nature doesn't have desires. Nature doesn't have needs. Nature doesn't feel pain. Nature doesn't suffer. It's just a word. The living creatures that are being tortured inside of nature, they're the ones that matter, right? And they don't deserve to suffer. No one should have to suffer. Saying that some should be tortured so that others can benefit is wrong. It's unfair. It's cruel. And we should have a suffering-free world. No one should have to suffer and be tortured because it's just unacceptable.
So essentially, you want this world to not exist because as long as we exist, right, whether that is, let's say, we tailor it to be this utopian society, there's still going to be suffering. Like, as long as humans and other species exist, there's going to be suffering. I don't think that is going to be something that we're not going to experience because even if you say, let's say, in this utopian society, all
I'm
the
not
food that
advocating for a utopian
wait, sorry,
society.
let me finish my thought. So in this society that you think is like there's no suffering, there shouldn't be any suffering.
So, we're not advocating for a utopia society. You're arguing against someone that's not here, basically. Even in a utopia, there would be lots of suffering. Even in a communist society, there's still going to be lots of suffering. You're still going to have babies that are forced to exist, born with brain cancer, brain damage, all sorts of terrible things, and they're going to suffer horribly. Chronic pain, that's a big one. Fibromyalgia, etc. These are all horrible sufferings that you can't prevent without extinction. Hello.
What's good? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Alrighty. I was just trying to, like the previous caller, I mean, I don't have that much to say, but I'm just trying to get a little bit more clarification on what you're trying to say. It's not necessarily a debate for me, but you believe that we should make all life permanently extinct to protect innocence from suffering?
Yeah.
That's an interesting take. So it's in military terms, what do they call it? A preemptive strike? Is that what you're saying? A preemptive strike?
It's preventing life from being forced to exist and to suffer.
So prevent life from being forced to exist. Okay, so you talk about nature, and nature doesn't force, it just is, it's just that which exists. There is no force involved in that.
But no one chooses to be born, right? It's something that is forced upon you.
Of course, but then we talk about nature, and we talk about the natural inclination for the male and female. They're drawn to each other at some point, and from that closeness, of course, life is made and created. Correct?
Yeah. But the child doesn't ask for it, right?
So it does not matter if the child asks for it. It's just like everything in nature, from the insects to the animal life.
Well, the thing is about appealing to nature is that, it's like saying, turn your brain off. We don't need to think about anything because it's nature, right? It's saying, it's immune from any sort of judgment or, tweaking or interference. It's a completely illogical position to just say, yeah, but that's nature, right? Just saying, yeah, but that's nature is effectively, ignoring the victims that suffer as a result. Nature doesn't have feelings. It's just a concept, a word. The ones that actually deserve consideration are the ones being tortured inside of nature.
And I'm not arguing with your stance at all. I'm very familiar with the mentality that you have. It's one of frustration, and out of that frustration, that frustrated mentality, we've seen people like you throughout the ages who've tried to really take out all life.
Well, I don't think that's accurate, really.
That's very accurate. So,
No,
do you believe in population control?
there's never been any sort of movement or party or military or anything that's tried to cause total extinction.
Okay, if you say so. I won't go any further into that right now, but I will say, do you believe in population control?
If you can point to one that says we want total extinction for all life, then I'd happily Google it right now.
Do you believe in population control?
How do you mean?
Do you believe in population control? So, for instance, may I ask where you're from? Are you from the UK?
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, I just find, this mentality very intriguing. I'm not laughing at it, because to me, it should be studied. I do find, the Western people are very intriguing to me. They're concerned about population control. They're concerned about climate control. They're concerned about life. And they're the number one perpetrators of forces that are very against climate, life, and everything. So how do you deal with that?
What are you saying? I have to be black to
No, not at all. Because we have some black people that are very much in line with Western way of thinking, very much. So I'm not trying to make it a color thing at all. I think it's more about the civilization than that Europe being a place of scarcity. It produces a certain type of mentality.
Well, funnily enough, the majority of our activists are Indian, and they're in India. So I'm actually a small minority in terms of the European chapter of the movement.
I'm not surprised, considering that India was once the crown jewel of the British Empire. So they're very much in line with that thought process, and we see that to this very day.
But this isn't about oppressing others, which is what you're making.
No, not at all.
It's about compassionately preventing extreme suffering and lives worse.
Of course. So you mentioned India, and then I mentioned the fact that I don't find that a surprise, considering that India was once the crown jewel of the British Empire. So they're very much infected with that Western way of thought. I don't find that surprising at all.
Well, thanks for coming on. And if you have anything to say other than just, racism, then I'd love to hear it next time. Hello, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Dan? Can you hear me?
I'm good, thank you.
Hey, I want to clarify some points. So I am an antinatalist, so I obviously understand quite a bit about where you're coming from. I'm just wondering if you believe in taking action steps toward this goal. And sorry, I'm not trying to strawman the position. I'm trying to actually understand, is this activism? Is this like passivism? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's activism. Antinatalism is unfortunately a self-defeating ideology. They're breeding themselves out and leaving the world to horny sadists. It's not a real solution, and it does nothing for animals. It does nothing to really work towards achieving a suffering-free world. It's opting out of the system instead of fighting it. So yeah, our movement is working towards doing this actively. You can't just sit around and wish for it, or ask other people to do it nicely. They're not going to do it, right? So yeah, you have to be active with it.
Interesting. Yeah, you're definitely right in the sense that it is self-defeating because yeah, I get what you mean. So then I don't know, something about it. The reason I'm not a pro-extinctionalist is because something about it seems inherently immoral to take into your own hands, which is why I only go so far as antinatalism. I don't know if you would agree with that. Like, would you be the first person to take the action steps to start extinctionalism?
Well, I mean, the movement already exists. I didn't start it. We have dozens of activists already, and we're growing every day. We're working towards a suffering-free world. We're already taking steps. We're putting ourselves out there. We're doing activism. We're growing the movement. I built the website myself. I've done a 23 episode podcast with the founder of the movement. The two of us. That's available on all major platforms. You can just search Pro Extinction Podcast. So we're growing it. We're making it happen.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be like it seems to be a pipe dream in the same sense as antinatalism is a pipe dream. It's like, well, it'd be nice if everyone agreed with this, right? But then there's obviously going to be people pushing back where it's like, well, I want to live, and why are you taking that into your hands? Or, just collectively, why are extinctionalists taking it into their hands to end my life when I don't want to? Sorry, I don't want to like get the live censored or anything. Trying to.
So, I mean, the thing is, what does life do? It reproduces and creates another batch to suffer, right? So, unfortunately, you do have to stop that if you're going to have any sort of suffering-free world. But, the vast majority of the victims we want to help are in the future. So, really, it's mostly about future life. And, current existing life is a drop in the ocean in comparison. There are a small minority of stakeholders in that sense.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let the next guest get up. I just wanted to get a little bit more information. I'll check out the podcast. It's really interesting.
Check out the website as well. It's got a really good FAQ and manifesto.
Cool. All right. Thanks, James. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for coming on. Okay, I think we've got time for one more caller, and then I'm going to have to go. The queue is currently empty, so if anybody wants to come up, I will take on the first person. Yeah. That was a great conversation, though, but yeah, I was antinatalist, right? I think a lot of people go through a similar journey when coming to activism and, figuring out what they should do, what movement they should be a part of. So I became an antinatalist, I became a vegan, and it blew my mind when I found out through the pro-extinction movement that veganism is bad and antinatalism is bad. You want to prevent your own child from coming into the world, but people don't realize that that's going to cause thousands, if not millions, of wild animals to suffer as a result. And antinatalism, again, if the population of humans went extinct, there'd be no one to help animals. So that's a bad thing. Veganism takes up a tiny fraction of the land that animal agriculture takes up. A tiny fraction. It's actually amazing how efficient vegan agriculture is and how little land it takes. But that turns out to be a bad thing as well. If you have a big forest, it's going to be full of animals suffering. If you don't have that forest anymore and you have a few cows on it or something, then there's going to be fewer animals suffering. The farmed animals on that land are going to have better conditions than the wild animals. They have euthanasia, they have medicine, they have shelter, they have safety, they have reliable food, they have lots of things like that. That wild animals are completely denied, and yet people deny the wild animal suffering, even though it's the worst. So, we really do live in upside down world where everyone thinks it's okay to exploit other life forms, to let them suffer. Everyone thinks, it's fine to not have a suffering-free world, right? But, that's the status quo. That's not really doing it for anyone. Look around the world. It's run by dictators. Animals are suffering. They're being tortured. The status quo is inherently immoral. It's inherently exploitative. It's inherently evil. It inherently says it's okay to torture other life forms if we benefit. It allows for unlimited suffering. That there's no upper limit on the severity or volume of suffering that the pro-life position accepts. Most pro-lifers would say, if trillions have to get tortured and it's just insane levels of torture and, they're forced to exist and get tortured, super torture, right? Then that's fine as long as, some people afterwards don't have that. So it's suffering blindness, basically. Who is this live for? Just sailing into the void. Yeah, obviously not for you, mate. If you're just a void, then you're not going to understand anything I'm saying. If there's just a void between your ears, then yeah, it's probably not going to be for you. But maybe someone behind you is listening. Maybe they'll benefit. But that void that you're basically admitting you are is not going to benefit. Right, we've still got an empty queue. I have time for one last one, maybe 10 minutes or so. So let's keep an eye on the queue and see if anyone is interested. If you have questions, if you're curious, even if there's something you've always wondered about that I haven't explained yet, then join now. Ask me. Now's the chance. I like to say that there's no stupid questions. Obviously, if you're just going to come on and be racist like that other guy or tell me to opt out, then that's not really like a stupid question. It's a bit worse than that. But lots of people have stupid questions about extinctionism. When I first joined the movement, it took me quite a few months to sort of get to grips with all of it and to be able to argue all of it and debate it. And there were, quite a few questions that I couldn't answer at the time, right? So like, one of the big questions that people come up with is, can't we just solve suffering faster without extinction? And you need a lot of kind of knowledge to sort of defend that properly. But no, you can't provide 100% safety for 100% of life from suffering without extinction, right? It's not a realistic practicality. Okay. We have somebody. Hello.
Hello. So,
How's it going?
good, how are you?
Good.
So, I was wondering, does all life, so that means it's like including animals, right?
Yeah.
And like, did you say earlier that you don't like have a means of going about this?
So our means is to grow the movement. That's step one. Grow the movement to make it possible to find and develop the methods to go about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'm like, I don't think this is necessarily like a possible thing. Just like even if you accomplish it and you spread your movement and then you accomplish it somehow, life will come back. Like that's just how it necessarily works. Life will come back. At least from my point of view. So
Well, the main part of our mission is to prevent that from coming back, right?
So-
Prevention. Yeah.
So like, okay, I understand.
Might be difficult, might be challenging, but I don't think we can really rule it out as possible.
You also said that some people you have the suffering of millions of people, and then they excuse that by the suffering or like the exemption, I guess, of a few, right? But it's not necessarily a few; it's a lot. Because there's not a lot of people suffering. There's people suffering, but not a great amount.
It's a big spectrum, isn't it? Really, you have at the bottom of the spectrum, you got the worst sufferers, and it's really bad for them. And then you go up the spectrum a bit, it gets a bit better, but it's still bad. And then you maybe get to the point where it's kind of hard to say if they're in a bad life or not. But most people are just surviving, right? They're not really having a good life anyway.
Well, so I'd say not necessarily suffering, but like the bad stuff is kind of what makes life good, right? Without the bad, there's no comparison for good.
But only for the lucky ones, though, right? For the unlucky ones, they don't benefit from the bad stuff. So, I mean, the vast majority of life, over 99% of life born on this planet, gets eaten alive as a baby, right, in the wild. So, even that's a bit of a slam dunk for extinctionists, really. I mean, that's not even our greatest argument, because you still have the kind of the steel man, or whatever you want to call it, of, what if there was just one? What if just one life form had to suffer? And that would still be too many. But yeah, most life is getting eaten alive as a baby. So even just on that alone, right, extinction wins.
Well, so I'd say that's subjective. It's like your subjective opinion that one life suffering is too much rather than like for the rest, right? That's a subjective opinion.
It's more that suffering is unacceptable, right? And what is acceptable is the cessation or non-continuance of other life forms living and having fun and surviving. They don't need that, right? In the same way that a future life form doesn't need to exist, so it can have fun, right? They don't need it. The ones that are suffering and the ones that in the future will suffer, they do need the prevention of their suffering. It's necessary, right? It's unavoidably urgent and necessary. Whereas, someone having fun, it's just a privilege. It's not really valuable or important, and it's definitely not more important than preventing extreme suffering.
Well, I would say it's important. I think it's important for all people to have fun and have a life.
But not if it's at the expense of like extreme victimization, right? Like we're on the side of the victims. We're on the side of the sufferers. We're saying no one should have to suffer. No one should be forced to exist and suffer. And it's wrong that anyone should be forced into extreme suffering and a life that they never asked for, just so that others can have fun, right? It's a terrible system that we have, and the vast majority suffer terribly from it and don't benefit. It's really just like the top 0.0001% of life on the planet has anything close to a vaguely acceptable life.
Vague? Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think a majority of the people I know have fun or a good life.
Well, the dead don't write books, and the sufferers and disabled people don't write books either. The mentally disabled, the physically disabled. You're not going to hear from them. You're not going to see them running around having fun on the streets. They're inside suffering, basically. And even
wouldn't
depressed
necessarily say
people,
that. So
even
like,
depressed people hide their depression because they have to for their survival. Suffering is just ignored and hidden, and
so that's why we find means of, stopping that. So like depression, there's
yeah.
ways to minimize
But
that
extinction
or
is the
stop
only
it.
way to provide 100% safety for all life, right? There's
Yeah.
no way to provide safety from suffering and all these terrible things without extinction.
But I don't think we need 100%.
But for the victims, they do need 100%.
Do they though? Because you said like
Well, yeah.
people with people with physical disabilities and stuff like that. They don't have like enjoyment, but they do. I know quite a few people
The
with
lucky
Down syndrome.
ones. But you thing
The
is,
lucky
you
ones.
can't generalize.
There's a lot of disabled people out there who
But
have fun.
you can't generalize all of them. So you
Yeah,
have a
but
divide.
that's what you're doing.
The lucky
That's what you're doing.
ones-
You're generalizing. You're saying a majority of
No,
them do
let's do the
have.
opposite of that then. Okay, so the lucky ones might have a good time, but the unlucky ones, right? There are unlucky ones. You can't say that all disabled people are having a great time, right? You just
Mm-hmm.
can't do that. Okay, and again, if you want to go off numbers alone, over 99.9% of life is born into the wild, into extreme conditions, and eaten alive. They're starving. They've got parasites, diseases. They're freezing. No shelter, no safety. They're being hunted by murderous animals. Would you want your mother to experience that? No. Would you want to experience it? No. So most life is actually going through hell right now.
Well, yes, that's animals though, and animals do have a significant role and a significant how should I say, like
Animals are the vast majority of the population on this planet.
moral
So
being.
humans
But
are
that's
a very
but I'd say a
small
majority of
minority.
the suffering. I'd say a majority of the suffering is caused by us and can be stopped.
Well, no, that's actually a myth. The vast majority of suffering happens in the wild, in nature, and is nothing to do with humans.
Really?
Yeah, so like when, let's say, a baby bird is in its nest and, the mother is away, it's got parasites, it's starving, it's freezing, and then a big predator comes and starts eating its eyes out while it's still alive. Humans played no part in that, and yet that is what happens to most life born on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't want to experience it. You wouldn't condemn someone else to experience it. So that's what extinction's about. It's about not condemning life to extreme suffering and a life that they never asked for. Because
I
that is
wouldn't want to stop. I wouldn't want to stop other people's lives because of my suffering. Maybe this is just me, but like if I was suffering, I wouldn't want to make other people die or go extinct because of my suffering. I would like to do more
But
good
you're
than harm.
prioritizing sort of a very small minority here, right? Which is the current existing life, whereas the majority of the stakeholders here are in the future. Billions of years of more life and more suffering.
But also billions of more years of happiness and joy, and you just like.
But in the same way that a rapist gets joy and happiness from assaulting a small girl or something, right? That doesn't make it okay. So creating or allowing extreme suffering like that just so you can have fun, it's wrong, right?
Yes, but that's more direct. So that's more like they're directly causing the suffering, while.
But it's just as bad, though. The thing is, allowing suffering is just as bad as causing it.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, it is, because the victim suffers the same, and it's only better for you because you feel more comfortable about it, but you're still evilly benefiting, right? If you know that a child is being attacked in the basement next to your house, and you find it funny, or you don't want to get involved and don't report it to the police because you're too busy on your video game, then yeah, it's just as bad for the victim, and you're just as bad as the one causing it. But
Well,
it's
then
just as wrong.
you're directly contributing then.
Well, basically, if you can help but choose not to, then you're just as bad as the one causing it.
Kind of. Yes.
Right. The victims feel the same suffering. So, you could say it's better, but in what way is it better, right? It might be better for you because you don't have to feel guilty about it or as guilty. But yeah, I mean, you should still feel guilty if you chose not to call the police because you were busy on your video game, right?
Well, yeah, but that's a matter of weighing morality. So you really have to weigh the morality of it, and weighing morality is going to be more based in subjective things, right?
Well, morality is very basic. It's really, don't allow or create suffering for benefit, basically.
Yeah.
So, most people already apply this in their day-to-day lives. Extinctionism is just scaling it up to, a sort of universal scale. And why are most people sort of against extinction or on the other side of it? Is because that's evolution, and animals were made not to feel guilty when they're killing other animals or exploiting them. So effectively, people have been given by nature a disability that makes them cold-hearted towards suffering, makes them want to be on the side of exploiting it and taking advantage of it in the same way that animals operate, right? We have an animalistic world in that sense. It's run by dictators. We have war, hatred, violence, all of these horrible things. They're all animalistic, essentially. And yeah, if you get out of that animalistic mentality of saying that, it's okay to exploit others and, extreme suffering is acceptable, because animals needed that, right, in order to survive. They needed to be able to murder a baby animal and eat it alive and not feel guilty. So we've still got that disability, basically, which monstrously makes us cold to suffering and okay with suffering. A lion wouldn't have survived very long if he felt, if he was trying to think about others and be empathetic, right? He'd have starved to death because he wouldn't have been able to go around murdering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So extinctionism is really just kind of an evolution almost out of that animalistic mentality. And it's saying we need a zero tolerance policy on suffering. No one should have to suffer. Forcing life to exist is bad. The extreme suffering that comes as a result is really bad. They're trapped in lives of extreme torture. They want to get out, but babies can't opt out. Obviously, they just have to sit there and take it. They're in immense fear and terror. It's like the worst nightmare you've ever had, but worse, and then in real life. And so, it's so bad, so extreme, so terrible that it's just not acceptable.
Yes, but so like the means of going through this would entail an immense amount of suffering. So in order to get rid of all suffering, you would have to go through immense suffering. So like you'd have the greatest mass suffering event to get rid of all suffering. That feels a little bit redundant.
Well, the thing is, so at any given time, there's lots of extreme suffering in the world. So to try and make that worse, it would be actually difficult to do that, right? I don't think any sort of mass extinction event could cause more suffering than it prevents, especially when you have billions of years of suffering prevented, right? It's a tiny little blip, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ideally, extinction will be painless, won't cause more suffering. We definitely prefer that, and we're working towards that. That's the preference, that's the ideal. But the thing is that, for example, if you were to spend 1,000 years creating a painless way to cause extinction, it wouldn't be the right thing to do, because you've just allowed 1,000 years of unnecessary extreme suffering. And so in terms of more suffering or worse suffering, it would be bad to do that, right? So we have to take into account all of the suffering that's happening now and happening every second, and will continue to happen. So it doesn't just get put on pause or anything. And for essentially, we're advocating for euthanasia, which is the most painless form of euthanasia or extinction possible, right? So we want to do it in the most painless way possible. People have come on and suggested that we hand out a bunch of knives to psychopaths and let them carry out the extinction for us. But that's, a terrible way to do it. It's going to cause lots of suffering. It's an impractical way to do it. It might end up being like some sort of gas, like sleeping gas or something, and all the animals just kind of fall asleep, right? There's lots of potential painless ways and, ethical ways that we can do it.
Yes, but so you mentioned that like a majority of this suffering comes from animals, and the thing about animals is that they can't consent. You're making this decision for them, like how you mentioned pregnancy and the kids or the babies didn't consent. Neither are these animals. The animals can't consent to you, erasing all of them, and neither can all the humans. So you will you can't go about this with 100% consent. So you'd be going about this without consent. And you said it's wrong for babies to be born without consent. What's the difference?
Well, babies can't be born with consent, right? So I guess the difference is that it's a different sort of context, right? And the thing is that there is no other way to prevent billions of years of suffering. If you have to euthanize them to do it and they can't consent, then it's for the greater good. Basically, it's the right thing to do. Their consent.
You're making that decision for them. You're making the decision for
animals
them.
can't,
For the
animals
greater
can't
good.
consent, right? Animals can't consent. They don't have the intelligence to make decisions. And also, as Luke very well pointed out in the chat, any sort of euthanasia that you give to animals is going to be a mercy compared to the natural death that they would otherwise have. So people are saying, "Oh, you're going to cause harm and suffering by causing death," but actually, the alternative is a much worse death.
Well, a possible worse death.
You couldn't name a better death than euthanasia, really. You might say.
For
Yeah,
humans,
you
there's
could
a
be
few ways.
surrounded by your family on your deathbed, but that's doesn't happen in nature. It's not a real thing.
I guess, but again, you're preventing death without consent. I would go about it without. You're going about it without consent, which is the whole thing.
If you care about consent and if you care about preventing consent violations and you care about preventing death, then extinction is the best way to do it, because we're preventing billions of years of consent violations, billions of years of death and cruel deaths.
But would that outweigh the amount of death that you caused?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you chat GPT, how many animals will be born over the next billion years or something, you'll be absolutely mind blown, right? The number is it has 100 zeros or something crazy. It's just incomprehensibly large.
Mm-hmm. Right. Seems like we've gotten to a stopping point. I'm gonna research.
Well, consider
more
checking
about
out our website. Maybe check out some of the videos on my channel or something. But yeah, you can also join our Discord. We have dozens of activists. We're trying to grow the movement, get the message out there. You can definitely come and learn more about us, and that's what people want. They want to learn more. They've got all these questions. That's a good thing, you know, even when I joined the movement, I had lots of stupid questions. I sounded like a complete clown a lot of the time. I'm not saying that you do, but I'm saying that everyone that's genuinely curious and not just trying to disparage us, come and learn about us, check out the website, and join the Discord and ask us questions there as well. Get involved in the conversation. Google search Abolish Suffering Discord, and you can come and join. I do have to go now because my girlfriend has just arrived home. She's actually in the stream, probably wondering what I'm doing. But thanks for joining us, and you know, I'll probably be streaming tomorrow if you want to join again and learn more about us. Really appreciate you coming on, Atheist Lover, and everyone else who's joined and watched and had a chat with us today.